On March 14, 2023, at 10:22 in the morning, Travis Holbrook was 512 feet below the surface of the Atlantic Ocean, 38 miles west of Key Largo, Florida, when his camera captured something that should not exist. Not at that depth, not inside a ship sealed for 36 years, and definitely not moving with the calculated, methodical precision he was watching through his viewfinder. Travis was 39 years old, a master diver certified for 16 years, and a freelance underwater photographer whose work had appeared in Maritime History Quarterly, Wreck Diving Magazine, and National Geographic's digital platform. He specialized in documenting historical shipwrecks, the kind of technical deep diving that required advanced certification, meticulous planning, and zero room for improvisation. He was the father of an 11-year-old daughter named Sophie. He was not given to exaggeration. He knew the difference between a curious grouper and something else entirely. His assignment that morning was straightforward. A maritime history publication had commissioned a photo series on undocumented wrecks from the 1980s, and the SS Valiant runner fit perfectly. The cargo freighter had gone down in 1987, reportedly due to engine failure, and lay mostly intact on the ocean floor in water deep enough to keep casual divers away, but accessible to someone with Travis's experience and equipment. The pay was $3,000 for 20 usable shots, enough to cover Sophie's summer camp and part of her braces. Enough to matter. Travis was using a closed-circuit rebreather with trimix gas, the only safe option at this depth. His camera was a Nauticam housing with a Sony mirrorless body, set to continuous shooting at 27 frames per second. The water temperature was 54 degrees Fahrenheit. Visibility was 60 feet, decent for these conditions. Current was moderate. Everything was by the book. He had been photographing the engine room when he noticed it. A vibration in the hull. Not the kind produced by ocean current or shifting debris. This was rhythmic, precise. 1.4 seconds between each pulse, like a heartbeat. He pressed his gloved hand against the corroded metal and felt it again. Something was generating that pattern from inside compartments that had been sealed since the ship went down. Travis moved methodically along the exterior, following the vibration pattern to the cargo hold. The access door was still there, heavy steel, covered in marine growth. But when his light hit the hinges, he stopped. Fresh scoring on the metal. Not rust patterns, tool marks, recent tool marks. At 512 feet below the surface, where opening a sealed hatch would require specialized equipment and a very specific reason. He checked his dive computer. Bottom time remaining, 17 minutes before he needed to start his ascent. He activated his helmet camera. Then he gripped the access wheel and turned. The door moved. It should have been seized shut by 3.5 decades of saltwater corrosion, but it moved smoothly, almost easily. Travis pushed it open and aimed his light inside. The water in the cargo hold was crystal clear, not the murky 60-foot visibility of the surrounding ocean, but clear enough to see the far wall, 80 feet away. That was the first impossibility. The second was what covered the walls. Not algae, not coral, something else. Organic structures growing in fractal patterns, glowing with faint bioluminescence that pulsed in sync with the vibration he had felt. Blue-green light, rhythmic, like breathing. And then he saw it. Suspended from the ceiling of the compartment, approximately 9 feet in length, was a creature with translucent membrane connecting elongated limbs to a central body. When Travis's light hit it directly, the thing did not flee or recoil. Instead, it rotated its entire body with fluid, deliberate motion, reorienting to face him head-on. What he saw next, he captured in perfect detail across 27 frames per second. Eyes, if they were eyes, reflecting his light back at him in a spectrum of violet that does not occur in any known marine organism on Earth. And the way it stared. Not with animal curiosity or territorial aggression, with recognition, with intelligence. Travis's fingers stayed pressed on the shutter button, capturing frame after frame as the creature hung there in the crystalline water, watching him back. Travis was not alone on this dive. His partner, Kelsey Brennan, was 32 years old, a marine biologist with a PhD from the University of Miami, and over 400 logged dives in technical deep-water environments. She specialized in deep-sea species documentation and had published 17 peer-reviewed papers on bioluminescent organisms in extreme pressure environments. When Travis needed a dive partner for work below recreational limits, Kelsey was his first call. She understood the science behind what they were looking at, and more importantly, she understood the risks of being wrong about it. They had descended together at 9:47 that morning from their charter boat, a 32-foot offshore dive vessel captained by a 70-year-old Cuban named Ramos, who asked no questions and kept perfect GPS logs. The descent took 18 minutes following proper procedure, with planned decompression stops marked on both their dive computers. Their gas mix was trimix with 18% oxygen, 45% helium, and 37% nitrogen, the standard configuration for dives between 400 and 600 feet. They carried bailout tanks, redundant regulators, and backup lights. This was not recreational diving. This was technical work where mistakes had consequences, measured in permanent injury or death. The SS Valiant Runner had been on Travis's target list for 6 months, ever since he found the wreck coordinates in a 1988 Coast Guard incident report filed in the National Archives. The ship had left Port of Houston on August 9, 1987, carrying what the manifest listed as scientific equipment, non-specified, and bound for Diego Garcia, a U.S. military installation in the Indian Ocean. It never made it past the Florida Straits. Official cause of sinking was catastrophic engine failure, but the report contained an oddity that Travis noticed. The distress call came at 2:13 in the morning, and the ship went down in less than 11 minutes. Too fast for engine failure. Fast enough to suggest hull breach or intentional scuttling. When Travis signaled Kelsey through the murky water outside the cargo hold, she had been photographing the ship's bridge structure 60 feet away. She covered the distance in 45 seconds, her helmet light cutting through the particulate heavy water. He pointed to the open hatch. She checked her wrist computer, confirming depth and bottom time, then nodded. They entered together. The clarity of the water inside hit Kelsey immediately. Travis watched her stop at the threshold, hand extended into the space, fingers moving through liquid that should have been identical to the ocean outside, but clearly was not. She looked at him. Even through the full face mask and the distortion of depth, he could see her expression shift from confusion to something else. Professional concern. The kind that comes from recognizing a data point that does not fit any known model. The bioluminescent structures covering the walls pulsed in waves, blue-green light traveling in ripples from floor to ceiling. Kelsey moved closer, her camera raised, taking reference shots with a scale marker. Travis could see her lips moving behind her mask, speaking into her comms system. He checked his own receiver. Static. Not the normal crackle of water interference, but a pattern. Regular intervals. Someone was jamming their frequency. That was when the creature moved. Not a drift or a swim, but a deliberate repositioning. It released its grip on the ceiling and descended 6 feet, stopping at their eye level, suspended in the clear water without visible means of propulsion. No fins. No expelled water. Just controlled, precise movement that defied basic marine biology. Travis counted the limbs. 4 primary appendages, each approximately 3 feet long, connected to the central body by translucent membrane that showed vascular patterns underneath. The body itself was cylindrical, maybe 18 inches in diameter, with a texture that seemed to shift between smooth and ridged depending on the angle of the light. And those eyes. Reflective organs positioned symmetrically on what Travis assumed was the front of the creature, each about the size of a human fist, catching the beam from his helmet lamp and throwing it back in that impossible violet spectrum. Kelsey touched his arm, pointed down. Travis angled his light to the sediment below the creature. That was when he saw it. A cylindrical object, metallic, approximately 8 inches long, partially buried in the floor silt. It must have fallen when the creature moved. He zoomed his camera lens and fired off 12 rapid shots before the thing rotated away from his light, and the object disappeared into shadow. His dive computer alarm chimed. Bottom time expired. They needed to ascend. Now, the ascent from 512 feet is not a quick process. Travis and Kelsey began their climb at 10:41, following the decompression schedule programmed into their dive computers. First stop at 130 feet for 4 minutes. Then 100 feet for 6 minutes. Then 70 feet for 11 minutes. The mathematics of dissolved nitrogen in blood and tissue do not negotiate. Rush the ascent, and you die from decompression sickness, your blood literally bubbling inside your veins. So they waited, suspended in the blue-black water column, while their bodies slowly adjusted to decreasing pressure. During the first decompression stop, Kelsey tried her comms system again. Still static, but the pattern had changed. It was no longer regular intervals. Now it sounded like a carrier wave, the kind used for encrypted military transmissions. She looked at Travis and made a hand signal. Someone is listening. He nodded. They continued the ascent in complete radio silence, communicating only through hand signals and slate boards, while somewhere above them, someone monitored frequencies that should have been private commercial channels. At 60 feet, Travis checked his camera. All footage secure. The housing was rated for depths far beyond what they had just experienced, and the memory card held 42 minutes of continuous recording, including 11 minutes inside the cargo hold. Whatever happened next, he had documentation, proof, evidence of something that should not exist at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean, inside a freighter that had been sitting on the seafloor since 1987. They broke the surface at 1:17 in the afternoon, exactly 2 hours and 36 minutes after they had descended. The timeline was perfect. The procedure was flawless. Everything had gone exactly according to technical diving protocols, except for the 3 vessels waiting for them. 2 Coast Guard interceptors, 45-foot response boats with mounted machine guns, were positioned 30 yards from their dive boat. A third vessel, unmarked white hull with no A-style equipment, but no identification numbers, sat between them and Captain Ramos's charter. Travis counted 8 personnel visible on deck. All of them watching. All of them waiting. He and Kelsey had surfaced into what was clearly a planned intercept operation. A man in Coast Guard officer uniform, commander rank insignia on his collar, stood at the stern of the nearest interceptor. He did not introduce himself by first name. He simply stated, "Commander Hayes, United States Coast Guard. You are diving in a restricted area and need to surrender all equipment and documentation immediately." Travis pulled himself onto the dive platform of their charter boat, removed his fins and mask, and said, "This is not a restricted area. I checked the navigational charts this morning. The SS Valiant Runner is not listed under any environmental protection zone or military exclusion coordinates. Hayes did not respond to that. He simply repeated, "Surrender your equipment, cameras, computers, GPS logs, and all recording devices. This is a matter of national security." Kelsey climbed aboard, pulled off her gloves, and said, "I am a marine biologist with the University of Miami. If you have discovered a new species in this area, protocol requires documentation and peer review, not suppression. Whatever is down there needs to be studied, not hidden." Hayes looked at her for 3 seconds, then said, "This is not a biological discovery. This is a containment situation." Containment, not preservation, not research, not environmental protection. Containment. The word hung in the air like a threat, like a door closing, like the end of a conversation that had never really been a conversation at all. 2 personnel from the NOAA vessel boarded their charter. They were polite. They were efficient. They confiscated Travis's camera housing, his backup hard drives, both dive computers, Kelsey's equipment, Captain Ramos's GPS logs, and even their cell phones. They handed Travis and Kelsey each a tablet computer with a document already loaded on the screen. Non-disclosure agreement. Financial compensation in the amount of $15,000 per person for cooperation with an ongoing federal investigation into marine environmental hazards. Sign here. Initial here. Date here. Travis said, "What if we do not sign?" Hayes said, "Then we impound your vessel, revoke your commercial diving certifications under emergency authority granted by the Department of Homeland Security, and initiate a federal investigation into potential violations of the Marine Protection, Research, and Sanctuaries Act, which carries penalties of up to $100,000 in fines and 6 years in federal prison." Kelsey said, "You cannot declare an area restricted retroactively. We had every legal right to be here." Hayes said, "The area was declared a temporary exclusion zone for military exercise purposes at 0900 hours this morning. You descended at 9:47. You were in violation from the moment you entered the water." But that was impossible. They had checked the Coast Guard notices that morning. There had been no exclusion zone, no warnings, no restrictions, which meant the zone had been created after they were already below the surface, which meant someone had been watching them. Someone had been waiting. Travis signed the document. So did Kelsey. $15,000 each in exchange for silence. And then they were escorted back to Key Largo by Coast Guard vessels on either side, Captain Ramos silent at the wheel, while behind them the unmarked NOAA ship remained on station above the SS Valiant Runner, positioned exactly where something that should not exist was waiting in the dark. But Commander Hayes and his efficient personnel did not know about cloud backup. They did not know that Travis's camera automatically uploaded low-resolution proxy files to a secure server every time it connected to cellular signal. They did not know that 3 minutes and 47 seconds of footage from inside that cargo hold was already sitting in a data center in Virginia, time-stamped, encrypted, and very much outside their jurisdiction. Travis waited 48 hours before accessing the backup footage. 48 hours of normal routine, playing with Sophie, picking her up from school, making dinner, acting like nothing had happened. He assumed his phone was monitored now. He assumed his home internet was flagged. So he drove to a public library in Fort Myers, 90 minutes north, used a guest computer terminal with a VPN service, and logged into his cloud storage account under a secondary email address he had created years ago for exactly this kind of contingency. The footage was there. 3 minutes and 47 seconds of low-resolution proxy video, compressed but viewable. He downloaded it to a USB drive, cleared the browser history, and drove to a coffee shop with public Wi-Fi to review what he had captured. What he saw made him replay the sequence 4 times before he believed what he was looking at. When the creature had rotated its body to face him directly, something had fallen from the ceiling where it had been suspended. A cylindrical object, metallic, approximately 8 inches long, tumbling through the clear water and landing in the sediment below. Travis had been focused on the creature itself during the dive and had not registered the falling object in real time, but the camera had captured it. 4 frames, shot at 27 frames per second, showing the cylinder mid-descent with enough clarity to reveal surface details. He zoomed the image to maximum resolution. The compression artifacts made it grainy, but he could see markings etched into the metal surface. Not corrosion patterns, not random scratches. Alphanumeric characters in a specific format that looked like military serial number designation. He took screenshots, enlarged them further, enhanced the contrast. The first 3 characters were clear enough. DAR. Travis spent 2 hours searching patent databases, military contractor filings, and declassified equipment records. He found it in a 2019 Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency patent filing, publicly accessible through the U.S. Patent Office website. Autonomous Oceanographic Environmental Sensor, Model A773. Cylindrical housing, 8.2 inches in length. Designed for long-term deployment in extreme pressure environments up to 2,000 feet depth. The patent filing included detailed technical drawings that matched the object in his footage almost perfectly. But here was the problem. According to the DARPA public project timeline, the A773 never went into production. It was listed as experimental prototype only, with all testing concluded and the project terminated in 2020. Except Travis had video evidence of one sitting at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean inside a shipwreck that had been there since 1987, which meant either the timeline was wrong or someone had placed that sensor in the wreck sometime between 2019 and now. He called Kelsey from a burner phone purchased with cash. They met at a state park beach access point where conversations could not easily be recorded. She had been doing her own research, pulling up everything she could find about the SS Valiant Runner from maritime archives and old shipping records. The cargo manifest from August 1987 listed the ship's load as 42% scientific equipment, non-specified, with a declared value of $9.3 million. Destination was Diego Garcia, the U.S. military atoll in the Indian Ocean used primarily for strategic operations and classified research. But the ship never made it past 300 miles from port. Engine failure, 11 minutes from distress call to total sinking. Coast Guard investigation concluded mechanical fault, case closed, no criminal activity suspected. Kelsey had found something else. She had spent 6 hours on technical diving forums, reading through incident reports and anecdotal accounts from deep-water divers. 11 different divers, working independently across the last 4 years, had reported similar encounters. Bioluminescent structures, unusual marine organisms with anatomical features that did not match known species. All of them in shipwrecks. All of them in vessels that had been carrying scientific equipment, according to their manifests. And all 11 divers had been contacted by federal agencies within days of reporting their findings. 3 had their footage confiscated. 5 had signed non-disclosure agreements. 2 had their professional certifications temporarily suspended during safety reviews. 1 had been threatened with federal prosecution under the Espionage Act for unauthorized documentation of classified defense installations. That was when the pattern became clear. The SS Valiant Runner was not a tragic accident. It was a deliberate sinking, a controlled placement of a vessel in a specific location at a specific depth, loaded with equipment that was never meant to reach Diego Garcia. The ship itself was the destination, and whatever those creatures were inside the cargo hold, they had not evolved there naturally. They had been put there, introduced, planted in an environment specifically prepared for them. The DARPA sensor was not documenting natural phenomena. It was monitoring an experiment, an ongoing, active, real-time biological engineering project using sunken vessels as isolated laboratories where synthetic organisms could develop in extreme conditions without public awareness or ethical oversight. The bioluminescent structures were not accidental growth. They were engineered. The creatures were not undiscovered species. They were created. And the reason Commander Hayes had arrived in 47 minutes, the reason the communications had been jammed, the reason the area had been declared restricted so quickly, was because the entire site was under automated surveillance. Someone had been watching that wreck in real time. Someone had been alerted the moment Travis and Kelsey entered the cargo hold. Someone had activated a containment protocol designed for exactly this scenario. The SS Valiant Runner was not a historical shipwreck. It was a laboratory, and it was still operational. Travis tried to publish the footage. The magazine that had originally commissioned his work declined to run the story, citing unforeseen legal complications that prevent publication at this time. He contacted 6 other publications over the following 2 weeks: marine biology journals, underwater photography magazines, even a documentary production company that specialized in ocean mysteries. All of them refused. 3 did not respond at all. 2 said the footage was inconclusive. One editor told him off the record, "We received a call from someone who made it very clear that running this story would result in federal subpoenas for all our communication records and donor lists. We cannot afford that kind of attention." Kelsey lost her position at the University of Miami exactly 3 weeks after the dive. The official reason was departmental restructuring due to budget constraints. But her research funding had been secure through 2026. Her publication record was spotless, and 2 days before her termination, the university's general counsel had received a letter from the Department of Defense requesting all records, research data, and communications related to Dr. Kelsey Brennan's fieldwork in federally controlled maritime zones. She was offered a severance package of $40,000 contingent on signing an expanded non-disclosure agreement covering all professional activities conducted between January 2020 and present day. Travis received a visitor on a Thursday afternoon in late April, a man in a gray suit who identified himself as a private security consultant working on behalf of interested parties who prefer to resolve this matter quietly. He offered $75,000 in cash for all materials related to the March 14th incident, including backups, cloud storage, and any copies distributed to third parties. Travis asked who he was working for. The man said, "Does it matter? The offer is legitimate, and it expires when I leave this house." Travis declined. The man left. 1 week later, Travis's bank account was frozen by the Internal Revenue Service for irregularities requiring investigation. His ex-wife received a call from Florida Department of Children and Families, following an anonymous report questioning his fitness as a parent. Sophie was interviewed at school by a social worker. The investigation was closed 4 days later with no findings, but the message had been delivered. But Travis had shared the footage before the pressure started. 3 people. 2 technical diving instructors he had known for a decade, and 1 marine biology professor from Texas A&M, who had published extensively on deep-sea organisms. One of them uploaded the video to a technical diving forum with a detailed analysis of the creature's anatomy and the impossibility of its presence in that environment. The post was removed within 6 hours. But it had been viewed 1,437 times and downloaded by at least 200 users before it disappeared. Independent analysis from marine biologists who reviewed the leaked footage confirmed what Kelsey had already concluded. The creature's anatomy did not correspond to any catalogued species in any ocean database. The eye structure showing violet spectrum reflection would require cellular arrangements not found in naturally evolved organisms. But such structures could theoretically be created through genetic engineering, particularly if the goal was adaptation to extreme low-light environments where standard biological vision would be ineffective. The bioluminescent growth patterns showed geometric organization inconsistent with natural formation, suggesting deliberate cultivation or introduction rather than spontaneous development. Documents allegedly leaked from DARPA in late 2023 circulated on encrypted channels and never verified as authentic, referenced a project called Abyssal Adaptive Biology, with an allocated budget of $340 million between 2016 and 2024. The stated objective, according to these unverified documents, was development of synthetic biological organisms capable of sustained function in hostile environments, including extreme pressure, temperature variation, and isolation from standard ecological support systems. The project summary mentioned oceanic deployment sites and long-term viability assessment in controlled maritime locations. The area surrounding the SS Valiant Runner remains a restricted zone. NOAA officially designates it as Protected Sensitive Marine Habitat, with no vessel access permitted within 5 nautical miles. But commercial fishermen working the waters east of the Florida Keys report seeing unmarked submersibles in the area every 3 to 4 weeks, always at night, always operating with minimal surface lights. Something is being monitored down there, or maintained, or fed. Travis works in construction now. He lost his commercial diving certification during a routine review that found procedural violations in his logbook from 2019. The violations were minor. The suspension was permanent. Kelsey moved to Bozeman, Montana in June of 2023. She works for a wildlife conservation nonprofit. She no longer dives. Both of them are alive. Both of them are careful. Both of them understand that some discoveries carry prices that extend far beyond the moment of finding. But here is what keeps Travis awake some nights. The Global Maritime Database lists 3,217 shipwrecks in U.S. territorial waters between 1980 and 2024. Of those vessels, 47 were documented as carrying scientific equipment, non-specified in their cargo manifests. 47 ships, spread across the Atlantic, Pacific, and Gulf of Mexico, all sunk in water deep enough to prevent casual access, but shallow enough for technical diving with the right equipment and training. 47 potential laboratories. 47 isolated environments where things could be grown, tested, and monitored without public knowledge or ethical oversight. And if the creatures inside the SS Valiant Runner were created, not discovered, then the question is not what they are. The question is what they were designed to do, and what happens when they are no longer contained inside those sunken steel walls.